interviews.
Okay, we're just nervous right around making sure everything is going to be good.
It's not just going to be good, it's going to be great. Woo! Thank you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I know it was a big decision to make between Caitlin Clark and Jonathan Reed. But I'm really appreciative that you chose Jonathan Reed.
I don't have peacock.
I've even lost my, oh, just a second, got my notes here. No, I don't. Anyway, welcome here. Jonathan's talk tonight is about camps and camping, and he has awesome photos to show you that you have, I would guarantee, never ever seen before. I wanted to remind you that also we are in the midst of a fundraising project for revamping our depot and creating highly engaging and interactive exhibits out there. And if you'd like to have a tour out there after this, I would be happy to take you back there to see what we're doing. It's easier to kind of see it in person. So tonight's a perfect time to do that. Anything else?
No, I just want to give a plea. Yes, if you have a little time when I'm done, by all means go with Mary into the depot. She'll be able to tell you exactly what we have in mind for this, what will eventually be a transformational project for our whole museum here. My goal is to have, oh, by the way, I'm the president of this, of the other group tonight, these days, but my goal is to make it be the must-see educational display in the area, whether you're a regular person who lives all year long or a tourist. It's going to be awesome. Oh, she does have her notes.
I found him.
Okay, there we go.
The last thing I need to do is introduce Jonathan. You may know Jonathan Reed as our local historian, author of 2 books about the area that are just fabulous. He's the guy that whenever you have a question about history, you contact him and he takes a deep dive into his rabbit hole and comes up with the answer to your question. And with a smile on his face because he loves to do those deep dives. So, without further ado.
Okay, well, let me get started here. Tonight's talk, I've titled it Sunshine, S'mores, and More, which kind of, for me, is a very nice way to put a fun label on what we're talking about tonight. A little roadmap of where we're going here. The Sunshine, S'mores, and More. Sunshine. We're going to talk about why we came here, meaning people, and stayed. We'll be talking about s'mores, you know, chocolate, all that stuff, marshmallow. That's the growth of the youth-focused summer camps that inhabited the area for many years. And the more is the influx of faith-based camps in the area. And there's a lot of interaction among many of those as well. But I've got a lot of pictures to get through. I do not want to keep everybody here all night. So let's get on to some pretty pictures. Thank you, Okoboji Tourism, for providing these lovely images. Why do people come here? Well, those of us who live in the area know all you have to do is look around. The permanent settlers came to the area and they realized this is a special place. Our natural beauty with the oak trees, the beautiful water, and the natural abundance of both hunting, trapping, fishing made life worth living here for the early pioneers. They came for the nature. Now, the interesting thing that happened in the 19th century is they went from being pioneers to more settled individuals. Our westward expansion brought us progress in this area. This in turn related to a move toward rustication. I'm going to turn around. A little hard to read there. I shouldn't have shrunk that down a little bit as much as I did. But apparently we were a favorite of people who enjoyed rusticating, that is, living life with nature, living off the land. To such an extent in the early days, this is from the 1870s, some people call us the Saratoga of the West. I've been to Saratoga, and It was pretty nice probably in the day, but we're hot better. So tent camping was the primary means at that time. You didn't have $100,000 motorhomes in those days. Not many people who came here would actually build a seasonal dwelling. They would tent camp instead. And once they got here, they realized there maybe was no need to leave, at least not leave right away. You could feed yourself and feed your family. There was hunting. I love this one. Jacob Snyder was able to bag 2 birds with 1 shot. In case you're wondering, 20 rods away, which is the distance, that's about 330 yards. So lucky him. And the natural abundance for hunting, prairie chickens were easily the most favored crop to harvest, if you will, because they were a little slow, they were not especially wary, and you could go out and basically just harvest prairie chickens. They were nearly hunted to extinction, in fact, around here, but they're now being reintroduced to the area. And thank you for the Iowa DNR for letting people see what a prairie chicken looks like. You'd be hard pressed to find one now. Their habitat just doesn't really exist much anymore. So let's not forget fishing. Daily limits, they never heard of them back in the day. It used to be that fishing parties were quite common. Once railroads came, people would actually hire their own rail car and come up from Des Moines or Cedar Rapids or whatever city with all their buddies and spend, if not a day, then certainly a long weekend fishing in the Iowa Great Lakes. And they would end up with just stringers, hundreds of pounds of fish. But not everybody managed to have train car access. So when you came here, what did you do? You lived in a tent. That little news article talks about some Primgar boys and Mr. A.G. Willits. I have no idea if that's them. But it certainly illustrates what can happen when you've got some family members, maybe an older gentleman. You pitched the tent, you went out with your cane poles, and you fished mightily. So, camping out at the lakes was what was accepted as the visit to be, is the way to visit here. You found a space. There were a lot of available spaces, even though many people might have planted or hoped to plant their land and their trees. She wants to be a little bit this way. Okay. Are we good now? Better? Okay, we're better now. Okay, so you could really just find an open space or most likely a grove of trees and pitch your tent there. Tents were oftentimes large enough for the entire family, not these little Boy Scout tents that you might have grown up with, or Girl Scout tents. People brought wooden floors with them if they could find them. They would bring cook stoves, tables, chairs, cabinets, everything else that they might need for an extended stay. Here's a little excerpt from a Presbyterian minister, Reverend John C. McClintock, in 1882, July 4th, from his diary. Friday was spent in fixing up the camp. I had not been able to get lumber for flooring, as the stock lumber yards had purposely been allowed to run down in anticipation of cheaper lumber coming. All the boards in the yard that I went to were fence boards, 6 inches by 16 feet. These I bought and used for our bedsteads, seats, and other necessary uses about the camp. Mr. Dixon let us take the table, which the Henry party, perhaps a neighbor, had left the previous year. By hard work, we got our tents in pretty good shape with the beds made, the kitchen and dining room set up by Friday night. Now let's remember, this is a tent. He continues. A violent thunderstorm with strong wind from the South City shortly after we had gone to bed. I feared that our tents would go over and went out into the storm to put up more stay ropes, fastening them to trees. Mrs. McKean, another tenting neighbor, was a good deal alarmed and insisted on my coming into her tent with the children. We did not get much sleep as the storm continued all night. Now, as a little addendum on this, July 4th, he left on the 6th of September. They lived in the tent for 8 weeks. How cool is that? So around here, we have a lot of favorite camping areas here. You know, Pillsbury's Grove, which was, let's just say that that's where the Gardner cabin is today, and all the land around it, also extended out onto the point. Arnold's Beach. Now, Mr. Arnold of Arnold's Park fame had not in the early days built even a hotel or opened up his house to people. People would camp on the beach, the sand beach that's there today. Center Lake, of course, was wild up until, goodness, the 1950s. Fort Dodds Point, Dixon's Beach was also a lovely place for people to spend their days. And then Minnewacan Beach, Orleans. Mary said we'd be looking at some photographs. Yeah, let's look at some maybe you haven't seen. Welcome to Prospect Camp. Looks like a happy family posing there. We believe this is about, it says here on Pillsbury Point, and these were probably some of the campers that came in, as well learn in a little bit, for the camp meetings that were held on Pillsbury Point. Love this one. Relaxation. Look at how lovely those people are enjoying. I mean, they've got an awning on the tent. They've got tables and chairs. The children are there. It's looking not only very rustic, but also quite peaceful. So let's talk a little bit about what it might have been like when a tent city got set up. Sometimes you'd have as many as 10 or 20 families. Few would come for a week or just a couple of days, and many would come for just a short time. The rest would stay longer, perhaps. As is the case today, you know, you had your summer friends, your summer tent friends, and you'd see them. And they were all bound together, not only by all the beauty that Okoboji and Recreation Okoboji offered, but also the shared hardship. Let me read, if you can, the difference here between men and women on the camp. Yes, the men are generally kept pretty busy, but this being Sunday, all seem to be enjoying a rest. The ladies, however, don't have much to do when they go on a camping expedition, and it must be a source of great recreation. They really clean up the campground, help put up the tents, sweep, make beds, do the cooking, go to the post office for the mail, and a few other little things. Yeah, the men must do the smoking, fishing, and a good part of the bathing, which occupies most of their day. So, 120 years ago, nothing has changed. Hawkeye Camp, this is one of the areas up on Minnewacan Beach. I love this particular photo because the people came with their bicycles. Look at all the bicycles here. And I'm not really sure, it says Hawkeye Club right there. I couldn't find any references to a Hawkeye Bicycle Club, obviously quite informal, but they came here, and if they were up in Minnewacan Beach, if they wanted to go to town, they had to come ride their bicycles or catch a carriage to buy groceries or do whatever they needed to do in town. So the bicycles were a handy thing to have around. Another lovely group here. I love this. It looks like the men, in fact, maybe have just gotten back from their bathing, and the women are doing all the laundry. You can see it hanging there. They brought tables, they brought chairs. They were here to stay. Here's a photo from tent camp at Pillsbury Point. You can just about stand at Pick's Resort right now and look to the west, and that would be the same view that you have here. You can almost imagine the new cement walkway going up and around. That would have been in place, that's in place now, but this is the view you're looking at. And people had brought hammocks, they brought swings, they intended to stay and have a good time. Again, more fishermen, just obviously, one thing to point out here, people always say to me, everyone looks so dressed up back in those days. They really didn't have a lot of clothing, especially if you're on a camping trip. You're not going to take a lot of clothing. But you had good clothes, your Sunday go to church clothes, and you had everyday clothes, which were probably the used Sunday go to church clothes. You know, you just didn't have a whole lot. This one I particularly like of some gentlemen in their little camp. You can see, if you look very closely, yes, there's a beer bottle on the table. So we know that they were having a good time. Now, one of the reasons why people came, let's make this clear, is because there were certain events that they wanted to attend. We'll be talking a little bit about camp meetings. We'll be talking about the Chautauqua. We'll be talking about the Knights Templar, before they built their lovely place on the west side of Big Spirit, they camped out as well. And there were all kinds of other little events, county fair and so forth, and people would come and stay, and they'd camp out. And sometimes it was a lot of people. Look at all these folks who showed up for Chautauqua, on the Chautauqua grounds. Anybody know where those were?
Gilbert Park.
Gilbert Park. Only Gilbert Park was just a small fraction of it, but that's right, it extended all the way, Peppermint Point, all the way up a little bit north of that as well. There was even an auditorium that was built just for Chautauqua that they said could hold 600 people at once. Amazing. But time marched on. Horse and buggy was slowly replaced by the automobile. And when that happened, people started traveling more. They were able to get here. They didn't have to take the train. They could hop in their Model T or a Model whatever, or Diamond Rio, and come up here for a few days. Sometimes they'd have to travel more than a day. And when that happened, what did you do if you were coming from, Cedar Rapids, and you could only make it as far as Ruthven? Well, that would have been a heck of a drive, too. But anyway, what did you do? You pulled off on the side of the road and you pitched a tent, just like we have this person doing here. But we had auto campgrounds that came up as well. For instance, a lot of people may not remember, young people may not remember the Arnold's Park City Park, which is where the big pavilion is overlooking the green space. That was a campground. That was a campground that was started in 1914. The city fathers saw that what was happening, and they wanted tourists to come to their area. We are a tourist area. We have been forever, it seems like. And so what did they do? They went to Dr. A.L. Peck, who owned that side of the land there on the hillside. He wasn't really doing anything with it, and they convinced him to donate it or sell it to the city, and they were going to put a campground there. Well, it turns out, by the time it was opened in 1915, it was an immediate hit. People came there, no charge. Can you imagine that today? No charge to camp there. Well, Dr. Peck benefited from that because why? They could look and see all his amusements in the Peck Amusement Park. So it was a good thing for him. He's not a stupid businessman by any means. So that park as a campground stayed in existence up until July of 2013. They actually opened up the park one last time for that, whatever campers they were going to attract. And then it was shut down and construction on the new pavilion started at that time. Then there was a later example, Wheeler's Camp, Wheeler Woods, just south of Arnold's Park. The Wheeler family, Aubrey LaFoy tells a great little story, I'm not going to get into it here, but basically some Shertel relatives were coming up into the area. They got there near the end of the night, asked Mr. Wheeler if they could camp there. He said no. Well, why not? Because I've seen campers do this, they'll let the sheep out the gate, and blah, 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 blah. He had 100 reasons why they couldn't. The relatives persisted. The next morning, when Mr. Wheeler woke up, all the sheep were right where they were supposed to be. The gate was not open, and that actually opened the door to other people camping there. It turned out it was a lovely experience for the Wheelers, as well as for people wanting to stay there. And the Wheelers, over time, not just cleared the land of the brush, they put in tents, they allowed people to tent. They ended up building a couple of cottages, I think as many as 7 through the years. And then later on, as people grew a little more comfortable with being able to spend a few dollars for recreation, you'd end up with trailers like you see here. This one for perhaps late 30s. But you were still camping. Indeed. Wash day at Wheeler's Camp. Here you go. You take your clothes down to the lake, and you get your bar soap, and it's a bogey bath for your clothing. So we've now established why people came and how they came. Let's talk a little bit about some of these youth-focused camps. Camps for kids. You know, how do you get well-rounded children in the face of this changing society? You know, by God, I was raised on hard work and being outside in nature. Well, summer camps fit the need for that. They were really not known until the 19th century ended, 20th century began. And when they began, they really took off. We won't be going into all of them that have been here. This is just a smattering of some that are kind of interesting. But among them, who can we talk about? Camp Foster, YMCA, YWCA, Camp Okoboji, Prairie Boy Scouts, Prairie Gold Boy Scout, the Lutherans had not just one but two, arguable almost 3 camps here. The Methodist camp, Presbyterian camp. They had just about everything. I think I even saw that the Christian Scientists tried camping for a while. And that must have been a tough crowd. Anyway, summer camps can be all season long. They could be just a long weekend or a week, if it's held during the summer. So let's talk about some of them. They'll be kind of interesting. Boys Town. We're going to be delving into some of the origins here. Dr. Green, Dr. H.O. Green of Spencer, back in 1904, he donated the land for a chapel. Wait a minute, we want to talk about Boys Town. You got to go back before that. So Our Lady of the Lake chapel was built in 1911. Wasn't particularly grand, but it did enable Catholic parishioners on vacation to have a place to go worship. The Catholic Church didn't begin and wasn't built until a decade later. But when it did, that made the chapel redundant. So Dr. Green saw what was happening, and the Catholic diocese didn't really care about maintaining that little chapel, so he built the casino ballroom and developed that whole beach. He planted out all the lands there for people to buy. But then, tornado came in 1936, I believe it was, totally devastated Terrace Park. For years afterwards, people would talk about finding pieces of farm equipment and houses embedded in the few trees that were left standing, and literally turned Terrace Park trees, all that Dr. Green had planted, into matchsticks. So, and the casino itself was also damaged. Casino ballroom, it was a ballroom, there was never gambling there. So what did Dr. Green do? After a few years, he donated the land to the Order of La Salette, a French ministry, if you will. And then they took it, as I say here, they made a ministry, a full-fledged missionary college of it. And so you've got these young seminarians, young men in their teens and 20s, who got to recreate here at beautiful Lake Okoboji. Seems kind of like a waste in some way, but I don't know why having this too much fun can be had in Okoboji when you're a seminary student. Regardless. That persisted for many years, but as I note here, the first campers really didn't show up until 1957, the first Boys Town campers. Now, Boys Town had been around since the 20s in Omaha. And as you can see here with Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney, he and Eddie Father, he's my brother, all of that. People knew Boys Town when I came here. So the first campers, there were just a handful of boys who came up in that first year. Literally six boys were in the first, then a group of 50. Then the next thing you know, hundreds began coming. And then as today as then, it was all about giving underprivileged youth maybe the first summer vacation they ever had. If you were living in, we don't necessarily think of Omaha as being run down and having inner city neighborhoods, but this was also grew out of the Depression as well. So, yes. And then strictly co-ed today. I've met many of the campers there. They're very, very nice people, and they're very appreciative of what Boys Town has to offer. So let's just say you're looking through the newspaper and you see this half-page ad. You will never regret vacation at the Evergreen Lakes. The summer music camp at Lake Okoboji. Did anybody attend? Okay, we have one attendee. Good for you. A lot of people now have forgotten. There was a summer music camp. It was just south of the Methodist camp. It existed about from 1928 up until about the 1950s, and it was put on by Morningside College. Oh, yeah. I mean, so you had actually, it wasn't just high school people, you had actual college professors, legitimate professionals, teaching you various aspects. And it wasn't jazz necessarily. I mean, they had rigorous training, opera, it was serious musical training on that. And it wasn't, and it would go all summer long. And then there would be performances throughout the summer as your various musical disciplines achieved the level of proficiency. So the community benefited from having them here as well. Not just the community, but you learn skills. Little point here. Ron Rawson of the National Broadcasting Company is credited with inventing singing commercials. He went to the music camp. Don't know if that's true, but it's a great story. Let's keep it going, shall we? So where else can we go here? Have some fun. How about Carlene's Storybook Camp? Did anybody here attend Carlene's? You'd have to be, well, fairly senior to it. Anyway, so Carlene Olson was somebody, as I researched this, I became more and more impressed with understanding who she was and what she was all about. As I point out there, I mean, she was dedicated, if not, I'll just say her whole life and her whole Okoboji life. She was a Girl Scout troop leader, a campfire leader, church and school leader, today what we would call a para-educator. She was an artist and even a nurse. Some of the first news articles I found about Carlene was when she was hired, and this time she was already in her 30s to 40s, hired as a nurse. She was a traveling nurse who would go help people, especially after World War I, or where they tried to get over the flu epidemic. And so, I mean, she threw herself right into battle with that one. But she established Carlene's Storybook Camp about 1928, and teaching girls, love this, citizenship, righteousness, high moral and social character. Yeah, that sounds daunting. That was also taken, that phrase was taken from when she received a citizenship award in 1953. She was, I believe, the first woman to receive that. Noon Kiwanis. And by the way, don't forget, we have many photos here and some memorabilia from Carlene's Storybook Camp. We're going to get back to that in a minute because I've got a question for all of you when I get done tonight. Okay, now all of that high-minded stuff that they're trying to train girls, it sounds pretty daunting. Well, let's be face it, much fun was that. They had swimming, boating, tennis, archery, crafts, acting, and stories. They filled the days all day. Elfin Cove Theater. Well, really, you gotta love marketing. Elfin Cove Theater was just a platform over the water. There were seats on the shore. There was a weeping willow tree with lights in it. If you were an 8 or 10-year-old girl, it must have been magical. You know, you could put on a play there at the Elfin Cove Theater. But Carlene, I mean, she was no spring chicken by the time she was in her 60s, had to finally let it go after World War II. And that's when she was able to pursue some of the other things that I mentioned here, the artists and artistry and things like that. Elfin Cove Theater. Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? You know, how can you not have a good time? I mean, even just looking at that fills the imagination. I mean, you could be anything out on that little stage on that.
Jonathan, can I add a couple?
Yes, please.
The girls, actually, I don't know if they did this all the time, but I've seen photos where they slept outside in bunk beds. Outside. Wouldn't that be awesome? And also, in case you're wondering where this was, it was in the Van Steenberg Estates, near where Tom Bedell's Peace Harbor is, in that area. And what's cool about it is that while Carlene had this camp, she was taking care of B.B. Van Steenberg. He was still living at the camp at the time. It's just so cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that their service to the community can take your breath away, and she's one that deservedly, you know, yeah, she was quite the community helper. Okay, let's move on to one other. Maybe nobody's heard about this one. Welcome to Camp McBride. Camp McBride, 1914. Turns out that Camp McBride, I had to do a lot of deep dive research to find out about this. Camp McBride was actually, I'll give Thomas McBride of Lakeside Laboratory fame, I'll give him credit for reaching out to the Extension Service and also bringing more people to his still brand new camp, the Lakeside Laboratories. And so Camp McBride, he hired the right people, and not too much longer it became Camp Holiday. A little story about that. Even though it was started by Thomas McBride with his name on it, the actual people that brought it in went to a Gulick camp, G-U-L-I-C-K. These were the people that believed in outdoors, recreation, all the things that you think about with summer camp for girls. The Gulicks eventually morphed over into being offering Wohelo camps, work, health, and love. Very clever on their part, with the focus on physical education, being outside, working together, all the wonderful things that you want from a summer camp. We stayed as Camp Holiday because the name came from Sarah or Sadie Holiday, 1900. It's variable here, 6 or 7 graduate at the University of Iowa who had attended the Gulick camps up in Maine. And so, with her expertise, she was recruited, she was the director. Now this camp, they're not lying here in the newspaper when they say it became one of the premier camps in the Middle West, but it unfortunately didn't last very long. And it was moved from Lakeside Labs to an area by Gull Point in 1919. 1920 was about the last year, intermittently, and was totally gone by 1924, when they moved the older girls' camp to Hackensack, Minnesota. Well, when that happened, it opened up some opportunities, and we'll get to them in a minute. Let's have a look at what Camp Holiday would have been like here. Girls jumping into the water in their very modest wool or cotton swimsuits. They learned how to make fire. They did crafts outdoors and indoors. Very involved in everything. And it morphed into the YMCA Camp Holiday. It's just almost seamless. So as a direct result of World War I, we now bring campfire. What some people who grew up in my age heard, they were called Campfire Girls. It's now, what's the word, not non-denominational, it's non-specific, it's just campfire. So it turns out the campfire was very big in helping people, more so in Europe than the US, recover from the travesty of World War I. They were definitely the people that brought the food in, they helped find the labor, they helped do the jobs to help rebuild a devastated Europe. But during World War I, while things were going on, just like in World War II, Rosie earlier, we had them in World War I too. Women hit the job market, so-called industrial women. Well, they needed a little relaxation. They had earned a break, and that's why Camp Okoboji existed, was to help these helpers have a little recreation after the war. The Army Connection, 5 excess Army barracks were brought in. Before long, more than 30 other cottages and other buildings were built. Camp Okoboji regularly would host over 200 girls and women every summer. But the Depression came. We're moving on another 10 years here. The Depression came and attendance dropped. Final year was 1933. They ended up holding occasional women's events through 1939, and then it was purchased by the Walther League, Lutheran churches in 1940. Just to show a very recognizable aerial photography here, YWCA Camp Okoboji. We're going to get back to that one in a little bit too, with a different name on it. So I said we're not going to cover everything here. Let's move on to the big boy. Camp Foster. It's the oldest continually operated summer camp in the region. It dates back to 1912, although it didn't formally move here until 1913. The original 47 acres purchased by Thomas D. Foster, the head of John Morrell Packing Company of Ottumwa, Iowa. Turns out that I knew his grandson, Bob Foster, who lived next to me on Haywards Bay. And Bob Foster also had the great community spirit. heading up the Dickinson County Memorial Hospital for many, many years. Camp Foster, you can drive along whatever that county highway is on the east side of East Lake, and you will find a little DAR stone with a plaque in it commemorating the fact that this was the area where the Howe family lived during the, now we call it the 1857 conflict. Old timers still refer to it as the massacre. So, 1912, there were boys that did come here, only from Buena Vista and O'Brien counties. 125 boys came throughout the summer here. It didn't take long to become popular. By 1915, over 500 had attended. And it was a really great time. I mean, they found a way to keep these boys busy. Morning classes and meetings where you received educational content. Athletic sports, swimming, fishing, boating, all the stuff that you want boys to be doing to wear them out. The evenings were focused on campfires, a lot of singing, and maybe some speeches by, if not by the boys themselves, that they had to prepare, then by some of the camp leaders. Let's have a look at what they were doing. I love these photos. These are from glass negatives, so they're nice and clear. So you can see a group of boys here on the campus, and some of the professors, some of the camp leaders. When you've got teenage boys, what do? The first thing you do is put them to work. So the first season, they ended up clearing the grounds of all the underbrush. And all you see is a little bit of blurry here. Yeah, they were busy boys for sure. But it wasn't just underbrush that they were clearing. Yeah, you also had to rid your campground of interlopers like that, which they did. But it was a lovely view. I mean, here you can see East Lake. These are the camp leaders at the time posing by a tent. But they kept the boys traveling around here. I love this photo. We know the date, it was 1912, and you can see all the things that are changed and different from the monument area right now. There are a lot of buildings around it. And if you look very close over here, that's probably where the cabin was, and is still today. Tenting. There were not the dormitories that you find there, or the houses you find at Camp Foster today. They spent the night in tents. But they did have fun. This was, as it says here, a faculty ball game. Do you think you can see where Butch Parks' place is going to be? Way over on the left side, maybe? There was nothing there. I mean, nothing on that side of the lake had been developed. And in fact, even on this side, it was still kind of the Wild West. Wonderful. But Camp Foster, through the years, it's evolved, it's grown. It provided almost immediately what we might call camp meeting facilities for other organizations. It wasn't all just YMCA, Camp Foster people who would be attending that. But the emphasis has always been on growth and summer fun, and really why we go to camp. So let's move on, since we're edging back into here some of these faith-based camps. Let's talk about the Walther League, which I mentioned already here. When they bought the YMCA camp in 1940? Whatever. By the time they bought that, tenting was not as popular. People wanted their creature comforts. And when Camp Okoboji failed, they stepped in. They stepped in to buy it because they had used the Camp Okoboji facilities through the years in the late 30s for their own meetings and for their own recreational outings. So it seemed like a natural, which they then embraced. Their fund drive was quite successful. They had a lot going on immediately right away to reflect the fun. The Camp Okoboji name was retained. No need to rewrite the book. It's something that works. Excuse me. So if you look at all the great stuff that they got to do here, the summer schedule, you had 4-H boys, American Lutheran Bible Camp. Who else was coming? The Presbyterian Senior High Camp, Augustana Luther, Concordia Cubs. I mean, it just kept going on and on. There must have been regular carloads and busloads of visitors coming to the Lutheran League camp. And you can see from that photo, it's the same place that Camp Okoboji was for the YWCA. Maybe even the same photo, they just changed the identifier on the postcard. But it was certainly a worthwhile place to be. You can see that they also had excursions on the Old Queen. It looks like a full load on that too. So today, Camp Okoboji's mission, refreshing body and spirit. Yeah, summer camp. But it goes all year long now because they've moved away from tents. They've moved away from the uninsulated seasonal stuff, and you can actually get heat in the winter and meet there. Now, one thing that I want to finish up with here is probably one of the other larger camps in the area, the Methodist camp. The Methodist camp wasn't always where you think. I already telegraphed some of this. The origins go back to the very first settlers, Reverend Seymour Snyder. Now, those of you who know history know that his brother Marcus Snyder was a banker, investments, owned a lot of property on the west side of the lake. Reverend Seymour Snyder had bought what became Egrelharv, but he was a minister. He gave the first camp meeting speeches and preached on Fort Dodge Point, another one of those popular campgrounds. It was in 1864. But he was called to Sioux City to be a pastor there. So then Reverend Pillsbury stepped in. And it was almost immediately, because it was something to do for all these wonderful pioneer settlers, almost immediately became a hit. When you heard that there was going to be a camp meeting, or at least anyone speaking, people, if they were not busy on the farm, they'd come to listen. The first camp meetings held on Pillsbury Point were only 3 days, and they were a hit, but only 3 days. So let's think about that. I'm going to tell you what happened with that. The Okoboji Camp Meeting Association was formed. Pillsbury's Grove, that whole point over there, became the place to come to the Iowa Great Lakes to hear a Methodist pastor preach, or many Methodist pastors preach, for easily more than a decade. But then again, railroads came in 1882 and 1883. So it became easier for people to get here. The Okoboji Camp Meeting Association began to suffer under its own weight. Remember the first camp meetings were 3 days, then there were 5, then 7, then 9, and at the very end there were 10 days to 2 weeks, and people were coming. You couldn't find a place to put them. So the Camp Meeting Association moved them around. When you lose your home, things can go bad, and that's what the Methodist group realized. Even though they had people coming from all over, they kept needing bigger and bigger plots of land to put on their events. And even though they first discussed in 1884, they just finally bit the bullet and said, yes, we need a permanent location. And they did, and it was a big step. They bought Brownells Beach area for $15,000. It's a lot of acres that they bought too. Huge step. How do you think it happened? They didn't have to worry. They bought it in late of, let's call it January of 1915. By this February article that is showing the plat map, they sold half lots already. And the others went within a matter of weeks. Roads were cut in, and permanent cottages were being built almost immediately that summer, and they continued for perhaps 20 years. And many of those original cottages still stand today. So we've got the Tabernacle. That was a big deal when they put that up because it could hold hundreds of people. They finally had a permanent place, a permanent meeting hall. The doors opened. If you look very carefully, the doors open on the side to allow some ventilation to flow through. This particular photo is from 1922 with the Upworth League. The Upworth League is kind of the Methodist equivalent of the Walther League, trying to get youth together so that they can socialize in a good atmosphere. And for this particular season 22, more than 500 people showed up, young people. What a success. And then also, the arch. I haven't been over this winter. Is it still standing today? Has it fallen down yet? I sure hope they preserve that, because that was always a landmark when you're on the water to see that. So before long, the Methodist camp became an attractive and permanent community that was formed with this. The roads were cut in, the houses. Instead of the society that you had with tents, now you had permanent neighbors. You could go borrow a cup of sugar from them if you needed them. I mean, their house was there. And they would do all the social things that they used to do in the other camping areas. Put on plays, talks, music, education, speeches, all the fellowship type of things that a religious faith-based camp is known for. So now, I want to wind this up here. We've now come full circle. What do people in Okoboji's beauty in the usual settings? Pastors spoke to draw crowds. The crowds came, and sometimes they stayed. Many returned to form summer camps. It's like dominoes, isn't it? You know, the summer camps became communities, and the communities then come to enjoy Okoboji's natural charms even today. That's about all I've got for you today on this one. I would ask two things. One, by all means, take a look at some of the artifacts that we have here from our collection, not just on Carlene's storybook camp, but also other things. And then I've got one other question for you. This was a week of my life. Don't tell my bosses that I spent a lot of time on their work. This was a week of my life to put these together and go down the rabbit hole and find some of the little dead ends so that I can be confident telling you facts. And I won't be hurt by what I'm going to ask, by the answer from what I'm going to ask. How many think I should take this and try to blow it up into a history book?
Woo!
Okay.
How many weeks of your boss's work with that?
Do I dare mention the R word, the retirement word? Might be a big surprise for them. But anyway, so I mean, this gave me a good foundation. And when I say a book, you also have to take the business into account. How many people are going to buy those books? I think all the folks who've been to all these summer camps, both early and late, or whose grandparents did, yeah, I think there's a market here. So thank you for that guidance on that. Mary, that's all I've got. What do you have?
I want to say thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan this is the third program that you've given for us? Third or fourth?
Maybe the fourth.
Third or fourth. This was my favorite.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this one was absolutely great. I mean, they all are. It really did.
That's good.
It really did. If you enjoyed this, we do have not a hat to pass. We have the hat box to pass. Did you start that? We do have expenses for these programs. We love giving those. We just absolutely love giving them.
Maybe some people have some questions.
Yeah, any questions that you have for Jonathan about the camps?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's kind of predecessor to the Camp Chautauqua area. So one Spirit Lake, those are ones in the other communities in Dickinson County.
Oh, Chicago, that's got a wild history to it. But the premier one and the original was up at what we now call Gilbert Park. But as Chautauqua kind of fell out of favor, they had to find other locations for it. Maybe because the campers for the Chautauqua